if the technology was available at our age at that time, oh my goodness, we'd be having a ball. I imagine YouTube videos, YouTube channel, everything.
You're listening to the Absolutely Cosmic Podcast.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Absolutely Cosmic Podcast, where we talk about anything self-improvement from the nerdy perspective. I'm your host, Joshua Salgado, and I'd like to welcome on a very special guest. He's a 10 times published author winning international awards, owner and founder of Authentic Embassy, where he helps people rediscover who are you really. And not only that, but he's an independent actor and producer for short films like Layla's Reign. I'd like to welcome on Mr. Ray LaCara Jr., you're a family friend and mentor of mine. I'm really humbled to have you on. I'm honored.
Well, first of all, I'd like to know who that person was that you just introduced. I want to go meet that person, but you've been very kind. Thank you. It's good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too, Mr. LaCara. Back in the days of when I was, just this pudgy little middle schooler, come down to your classroom and we talk about comic books and life and, the future, stuff like that. And then now to where we're both running businesses and...
Let me tell you something. You are going to far exceed anything I could have ever dreamed. And I think that is the beautiful part. You and I have already talked before a little bit about being authentic and pursuing your most authentic passions, right? And hopefully teachers are helping students to always do that. But I think at the same time, the way life goes, I think sometimes we forget to pursue our own passions. And not that teaching isn't a passion, but I think sometimes there are some things that people find themselves, they get into, they feel comfortable with, rather. They find certain things come naturally, or they really enjoy what they're doing. That's always important. But what's something I've found since, over the years, is that there are also other things that people are passionate about, whether it's playing guitar, doing art, just all these different things, even making videos. I know my brother and I, growing up, we would have done this. We would have excelled at this. We would have loved doing the whole YouTube thing. But there's another part, though, that I think sometimes we get so caught up in what we're doing, and not in a negative way, but we get so caught up that sometimes we lose ourselves. And I think that that's the other thing, is that I think we need to be, as educators, just as passionate about all parts of our lives and offer that as an example to the people that we're teaching and take that same kind of advice. So if you feel that passion starting to disappear, or you're feeling, let's say, that the system is kind of limiting you in any way, we need to take that next step so that we can continue to pass along that passion, pass along that message. And so that's why I'm saying you're going to excel that much more. First of all, there's so many great things that are available now for people to just take that idea and run. But also it's the enthusiasm of youth, and just you're so passionate about things. You have that energy, and that's a beautiful thing. It's not a negative thing that you will far surpass your teachers. It's supposed to be that way. But it's great to be in that same kind of space with you. And it's wonderful to watch you progress, evolve, and just become the person that you're supposed to become.
I appreciate that, Mr.
Sure.
LaCara. That means a lot. That's, so I guess I'll talk to you since we're kind of on. When I came back from deployment, I didn't know who I feel like I left myself on deployment. So I think that's why I've started to pursue this so much, is because I was initially going to school to try to be a biomedical engineer. I don't know why. I guess it was for money, or for maybe I got to be a smart person,
Yeah.
And I remember I reached out to you, and I was in a very rough spot, and you kind of guided me back again to where I should have been in pursuing. That's when I decided, I'm like, you know what? I started off as the t-shirt shop, and then I was like, well, why not make a podcast? I like videos. I like talking. I talk a lot. And so that was where it kind of started, all thanks to you. You're one of my great mentors that like every, a few times a week I reach out, we talk, we talk about what we're doing, and you kind of help me facilitate a lot of these ideas and passion. So again, I want to say thank you to you.
You're very kind. Look,
Yeah.
and that means a lot. But I have to share something though. Um, the hardest part about anything in our lives is
Mhm.
having that motivation.
Mhm.
Having Sometimes we don't even know where to start. And what was great about what you've already done though is that you started. That's I wish there was some kind of magic, but the hardest part is just starting,
Yeah.
because you're going with stuff that you were going with, a path that you were somewhat, even though it was going to be, maybe you didn't know how it was going to turn out, it was still something much more familiar. But this, following this is a little bit different, right? And then it's not, um, everybody around you too is so used to following the same kind of
Mhm.
path or the same routine, and here you're doing something completely independent. So there's a part of us that's a little guilty about that. There's a part
Yeah.
of us that is, I don't have many people around me with whom I can connect with. And that's something else that you did, is that, first of all, it's almost going to happen by osmosis, because you're doing the podcast and you're inviting these professionals and these different people in. That's networking. That's
Yeah.
learning from these different people,
Sure.
which is a wonderful thing. You've then also transitioned how you were going to receive that education with what you've done in school now.
Yeah.
So all the things you're doing are in the right. To me, I look at it and I'm saying this is the right way to go about it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another thing too. But there's going to be that little bit of. I know when we moved, just for the
Mhm.
audience, my wife and I knew Josh through uh, our relationship in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So I taught in Connecticut, and my wife and I transitioned to the West Coast. So we're in Seattle, Washington now. But when we were when we made that transition, Josh, the most difficult thing about working on your own is, especially after years of going to a specific place, there's a little bit of guilt. Oh my goodness, I'm
Yeah.
home. What are people going to think? There's always that. And then there are people who used to be in your circle who think, well, that person's home, so that person
Yeah.
has all this free
Yeah.
time. You
Mhm.
don't. You actually work harder when you are
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
And at least after COVID, I think some of the way people think about people working from the home changed a little bit, kind of like education online changed a little bit after
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah.
But people have worked from home for the longest time. They've had home
Mhm.
studios and different things.
Yeah.
But if you've been if that's been your mainstay, though, working that 9 to 5 thing where you're always going out to a certain place, it can be a little daunting, because
Mhm.
people also who've been used to that kind of look at you a
Yeah.
little differently,
Yeah.
or they're wondering, what are you doing? Or why don't you just go and do X, Y, and Z? And for us, I mean, there are some people who've grown up with creating businesses and are used to that. We are not. This is new for us. But it is freeing because you're
Mhm.
following your passion, as you have done. And again, I'm not going to, I'm not going to armchair your path, but what I see, it's amazing what you're doing, and I'm so proud of you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lucara. Thank you so much. And I actually have a question for you.
Sure.
Um, I guess I guess I want to ask you, because I never really asked you this. So you've had, as we kind of went over, an insanely lucrative and successful career in your endeavors. Like, how did it start? Where did it start, and what made you pursue what you're pursuing now?
Well, I think if I go back to as a young person, I remember spending summers. We were out in the boonies in Connecticut. It was very rural, and there wasn't any. Just like my students now talk about going to camps, and I know we probably could have done the same, but we never did. And I think that would have been I think about how exciting that and or interesting that would have been, being
Yeah.
able to engage with other people and just have those different experiences. But I used to spend summers, well, quite a few summers anyway. Um, there was this thing called books by mail, and what you'd be able to do is pick out books. I think it was from the Willimantic Library, but you'd be able to pick out books that you'd like to read, and you put it in the mail, and then like a week or two later, you get a package, and you'd have the books, and you got the books for a couple weeks, and I found, excuse me, I found that was very interesting because I read a whole bunch of different things. Now, the only problem, I had no one to talk to about
Yeah.
these books.
Yeah.
So I'd have these, imagine if we had the internet back then, there'd probably be some forum or some group you'd be able to connect with. So, yeah, so that was the only challenge, was that I had these great books, these great stories. Some were fiction, some was nonfiction. Uh, and I was never one for too many cartoon books or anything like that. I always wanted to read something that was kind of meaty, that was interesting. So fast forward to going into college, that's the thing I really enjoyed as well. And as luck would have it, I actually worked at the English department. And just being around the professors was, just picked up a lot from them as well.
Mhm.
Not just being in their classes, but just being around them.
Yeah.
So I got to the point I'm at because I've always loved literature. I always loved the art of storytelling, and I thought that as a teacher, I've always had the idea that we should be doing that which we are teaching. So if you're a science teacher, real quick,
Yeah.
offshoot story for a moment. I ended up finding out that a colleague of mine had she was married to a physicist, or a teacher who taught physics. Yeah, that's what it was. Teacher who taught physics. So I got all like nerdy. I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is so exciting!" So do you get to do this with the students? Do you do that with this? And it was like, no, there was no enthusiasm. And
Yeah.
I'm not throwing shade at anybody, because great teacher and all that, but I just get overly excited about certain things, and
Yeah.
I just thought, wow, that would be great to talk about and talk.
Yeah.
And there just wasn't that same kind of enthusiasm. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm always the type, though, that feels we should be practicing what we teach. So that would
Yeah.
mean doing maybe a paper or research, or doing the exact same things, write stories, write journal entries in the English classes, things like that. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to try to do it not just for myself, but I also wanted to do it as a way to know what writers were going through, what my students might be going through when we
Mhm.
analyze. And I also had a couple of stories that had been with me since I had been a child that I wanted to somehow get out there.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. That's phenomenal. That's, I feel like a lot of creatives overall, but like people who write, and it's almost like a thing they just have to. And the fact that you took your career and you wanted to actually do, you were an English teacher, but you wanted to actually write to understand. It's almost like how an actor will get into a role.
Yeah.
They will immerse themselves by doing what that character would do. So it's really interesting to kind of see that.
Yeah. And by the way, yeah, so even just being, here's the crazy part. When I work with my students, one of the things that I try so hard to do, is to make a point of why we're doing what we're doing. Right now, I work with so many students who they're just so disinterested because they're thinking, why are we even doing this? So that's
Mhm.
in their traditional classroom, and I work with them outside the classroom. So it's really about, okay, you have a right to ask the teacher, why are we doing this? How does this impact my life? I mean, that's what you should be able to do so that you can buy into what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, when it came to when it came to uh, uh, analyzing stories, now a lot of times you cover a story in class, and I don't know about you, but I kind of think we've all grown up with this idea that, oh, we're supposed to enjoy the stories. Well, yes and no. It's great if you do enjoy the stories, but part of it is that you're analyzing. Everything
Mhm.
is about analysis.
Yeah.
And I just felt I felt something was missing even for me at first. I felt like I wanted to know more. I in order to really crack that shell to help the students understand even something as simple as, okay, what is the definition? I'm going to get nerdy now online, but the definition for conflict. What's the definition for theme? It's one thing to teach those. All right, but let's see if we can extract the same from the stories, or what makes it challenging. And then when you're writing, are you writing with a purpose? If you're writing a story, are you following those elements yourself? And the best way to really understand something is to turn around and teach it, because then you're looking at it in so many different ways. And I think that that's what has helped. And for me, it just helps me get more and more into what I'm doing as well. If I can try to understand where the students are coming from, and it doesn't matter what course or what thing we're trying to teach.
100%. And I feel like in the past few years, I've been trying to read more and more, like just like a lot of self-improvement, philosophy, fiction books, like anything really that piques my interest. And I've noticed that, an author's interpretations, like almost subconsciously, are put into, so like you said, what is conflict? You might have like that overarching definition but it's like their definition or what they've experienced, and then they put it into those characters or events. So it's almost like it may not be necessarily a deeper theme, but you can see what they experienced and their lens of life through the characters in the world that they build, if that makes sense.
Oh my goodness, it so much does. But in addition to that, it's
Yeah.
also what we bring to it. It's
Yeah.
also what
Yeah.
we bring to it. I sat
Yeah.
down with a student of mine, and this is going back almost 20 years ago, and we were having lunch, and actually, it was a friend of the family, her son, and at the time, I don't think he was even in high school yet. But we're having lunch, and he turns to me and he says, "I can't believe that you used me as one of your characters in the book." And it was the most that meant so much. But at the same that he said that, and that he felt that, and at the same time, I hope this doesn't sound negative in any way, because I don't mean it to be negative in any way.
Yeah.
I didn't. I didn't actually.
Yeah.
My thing is, all the years of working with different students, that's what I kind of brought to the character that he was referring to.
Mhm.
But the fact that he felt that character was so close to him
Yeah.
is beautiful. I mean, I didn't want to, because I didn't want to ruin the moment,
Yeah.
and then say, well, I really didn't, because I thought that would have been awful. And I again, I'm not throwing shade at anybody or being overly critical, but I thought that was an incredibly beautiful thing for him to say, that he connected with the character as much as he did. So it's that part. When you talk about conflict, you need to have something that propels the story. What is the
Yeah.
purpose for our story?
Mhm.
So there it is. But what makes, I think, the most profound writers, and the reason why we return to the same books over and over again, is because it's all the other conflict that's in the
Mhm.
story. All a lot of times they call it minor conflicts. It's because that's what you and I and all of us deal with. There's one thing that
Mhm.
kind of pushes. One thing I use with my students a lot, if I want to quickly talk about a story, is I'll say, okay, imagine a daughter and their mom got into an argument in the morning right before school. So there's your main conflict. It's going to
Mhm.
propel the story. That's going to.
Yeah.
So, um, so they get into this big argument, and then on the way to the bus, they almost miss the bus, and then at school, let's say the young lady ends up failing a test, and then she finds out she forgot her lunch. These are the ripple effects, right, of that
Yeah.
major conflict. And this is what happens to us in life. So we have those minor conflicts, because
Mhm.
now, her heart is thumping because you almost missed the bus. And then you get to school, and now you're not even thinking about the assessment that you have. And then the teacher's going to be upset. And I feel off. There's that self loathing because
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough. And then let's say she gets into an argument with her with her friend. Well, why did that happen? That didn't really
Right.
need to happen. And anyway, let's say though, once she gets home, her and her mom um, apologize and make up. Well, there's our resolution.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing, though. We all know in real life that resolutions are not tied up in a nice little bow.
Yeah.
There's still going to be a residual effect to what happened during the day. So even though the main conflict now has been somewhat resolved, there's still something else that lingers. And then there's what did we get from, what did we learn? How do we respond to all those minor conflicts that were
Yeah.
before that? So that's in a very simplified form. But when you have an author who can do that over the course of 80,000 words, 150,000
Yeah.
words, you have this amazing world, this amazing thing that you just, and it can be fantasy, it can be sci-fi, it can be,
Yeah.
but you're caught up, and it's
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think there's something I try to talk to my girlfriend about, like just understanding stories like this, because I'm writing the graphic novel.
Right.
So, and she's just like, like she's not following. She's very scientific. She's a marine biologist. So, but I told her, I said, it's the Spider-Man phenomenon. It's like people loved Spider-Man because he was a teenage to college guy that had real world problem, relationship, family problems,
That's
school
right.
problems,
That's right.
and it rippled. And then you had his villains coming into his personal life. And so I was telling her, I said, people love like any of these big supernatural or science fiction or Marvel type stories. They became beloved because the characters were people, because they forgot the lunch after a big fight, because when they got into a fight with their girlfriend, it rippled into them being the superhero, or when they lost, when Spider-Man lost Gwen Stacy, right? Spoiler if you haven't read the comic books, but, he becomes a dark, brooding, and he almost, fights his villains and takes his villains out completely. And so, and I don't mean to like bring it into a nerdier child, like, I guess, explanation, but I love that you said that, because a lot of people, I think we take it for granted when we read, but that's what makes us resonate with a book or a story, is the real world implication that it's not just one fight, it's not just one conflict, but it ripples over time. And what happens when someone who maybe they become an alcoholic and lose their wife, right? Well, are they going to barrel down to becoming just, that is that their character arc, or do they rise up above it? And it ripples into creating that awesome story.
Right. And by the way, speaking of that, but that's kind of what's happened to recent stories or recent movies, is that they we can't connect to these characters. And in part, by the way, it's because, and look, you gave me this beautiful intro, but the reality is I've only now started to write better than I ever have before.
Yeah.
Even as a teacher, there were things that I missed as a writer. And one of the things, we need to also keep in mind in any kind of storytelling is always that show, not telling. And what's been happening so much recently is, and I'm thinking of Nick Fury. He was in a series last summer, and just a lot of it was telling the audience. Okay, well, that's why we don't resonate with the character. So, you have the reason why a story might be 85 to 100,000 words is so that you can get to know that character. And for a moment, I'm going to use Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies is only 11, maybe 10, 11 chapters, I think. It's really it's the size of a YA novel. It's not even that long. First 3-4 chapters are a lot to get through because the author spent so much time describing the island and all the different things that the boys see. It does include what the boys are doing and different things if you know the characters from the book. But you have to get through the first 3-4 chapters, even though it's really heavy on description. Well, the reason why is because it pays off at the end. After the third or fourth chapter, oh my goodness, all of a sudden just takes off, and it's this crazy ride until the end of the story. But you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to buy into it unless you got through the first 3, 4 chapters. Otherwise, it's like, okay, they're on an island. Oh, this is happening. But you need to have that build up and understanding of what's happening with those characters and where they are in order for it to take off. So if all of a sudden, if we cut all that out and just had the boys on the island and this and this happened,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be like, okay, well, all right. It's kind of like, but it
Yeah.
would be more telling than showing. So
Yeah.
it's there's much more investment in those characters in
Yeah.
that situation and the danger they might be facing. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the thing we also need to keep in mind when we're writing. If we want our
Yeah.
characters, if we want our readers, or in the instance of film, if we want our audience to really um, invest in those characters, then we need to get to know them
Mm-hmm.
rather than, and we need to see, or we need to know about the situations they went through so that we can identify with that, or even get to know them that much deeper rather than, oh, I was this. Like you mentioned the instance of someone who's an alcoholic who may have lost their family. All right, well, that's fine. But if you tell me that, I'm not going to feel as much as if I kind of go through it with you.
Yeah. 100%. It's that
And
immersion. It's that immersion. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, and we did that. By the way, the perfect example you mentioned was Spider-Man, but also if you think about cinematically, that was Tobey Maguire. That's
Yeah.
why that first film was so successful, because it didn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what age you were. You said it best. It wasn't about the superhero. It was about the individual.
Yeah.
And young or old, you could connect with him, how it felt to have a crush on somebody, how, puberty, all these different things, and then to have be able to control those emotions, and then to rise up to become, So it was just, that was amazing. They did such an amazing job with that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why that was so popular. But even the comic, like you said, perfect example. Perfect example.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. I think it's the like you were mentioning, immersion, being able to envision yourself right next to the character as they're going through it, and then you feel it and it resonates with you because it's relatable. And or being able to envision yourself as the character, like some I don't know why it comes to mind, but Halo, I think Master Chief, the reason why he never took his helmet off is because you become the character Boba Fett, right?
Yeah.
You were supposed to be the badass bounty hunter. um and so like you essentially, or Darth Vader, even you're this brooding bad guy. I don't know why those, like, science fiction stories are coming to mind so innately right now, but I think when you're able to jump into the story within your mind, and that was the biggest thing. Another conversation I had with my girlfriend was, I said, when you read something, especially fiction, do you, like, are you in that world? Do you envision it? And she's like, not really, I just read the words. And I'm like, you don't like see the world in your mind, like
Mm.
you don't hear the characters, you don't feel the characters. Like if it's a really good book, if they're talking about a big, like, street food plaza, like you're not able to smell it or hear the sizzling of food, like as the author describes it. Like if they're saying, if they're struggling or if they're going through this great accomplishment, you can't feel that almost emotional response in your heart. And she's like, no, not at all. I'm like, so I think that's the key, especially with movies nowadays, like you mentioned. I feel like everything's a gimmick now. It's almost like a 80s action toy gimmick. They're just trying to put to the formula that makes money and make things that look good. But I can't relate to any one character anymore. I feel like there's no weight to
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much to say on that.
Mm-hmm.
Just, and I know for me, part of the reason why I get into so much of what might be the zeitgeist is my students, and I can't even tell you how much has fallen since COVID, because
Yeah.
at the height of that, everybody was home, but
Yeah.
you had, right before COVID, you had Endgame, and Infinity
Mhm.
War. Everybody was just so excited about.
Yeah.
Everybody was just so excited about um, those stories and those characters. And it seems like afterwards, it's been more about um, quantity over quality,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then some of our characters have been changing and different things too, and then we're not sure what the direction is of the storyline, because that's another thing too. You're always trying to hope that everything connects in a certain way. Oh, maybe they've designed this. This is some kind of fabric, and it's all that it intertwines with each other. And then you're not really sure. I remember I saw a couple of the series that came after. Um, I haven't seen many of the movies that came after, and I just remember walking out going, "Was it me? Am I just not interested anymore? Did I grow up? Why did it take until I'm this age to grow up? There's got to be something going on." And then you listen to some of the critics and such, and I think some of the, I think some of, I think some of the criticism is a bit harsh,
Yeah.
but but that's because people have held these characters and these stories to be
Yeah.
very dear to them. Why are you
Yeah.
changing this, or why are you not honoring
Yeah.
material that is? And by the way, I'm like that with Beowulf. I think
Yeah.
Beowulf is one of the most incredible stories. There's a reason
Mm-hmm.
why it has lasted for as long as it has, and it
Mm-hmm.
seems like every time it's gone to some sort of live action storyline, they've ruined it. And I know they
Yeah.
did this animated version like in the early 2000s, and again, I don't know why they would change. I mean, they really made such incredible changes to it. And one of the great things about him was just that there was this character who stood above all others and was I don't know, he just had great qualities and that's why he was a heroic character and one of the ones that
Mm-hmm.
stood the test of time. And so to
Yeah.
mess with that,
Yeah.
oh boy! So I get really, I get really, I am over a silly story, but I get very offensive and very, I should say, defensive. Um, and I was really upset that the people that were involved, one of them, when it went into animation, one of them, and I'm not going to say his name, but he's well known. He is the definition. You mentioned lucrative writer. No,
Yeah.
that's a lucrative writer. But he does comic books and different things, and
Mm-hmm.
he's amazing. Uh,
Yeah.
so I would have thought that someone like that would have really understood why would you mess with
Yeah.
IP that is as impressive as Beowulf.
Yeah.
So that always really surprised me, because here you have a chance to use modern technology to open this up to a whole new audience or a whole new generation.
Yeah.
And then what you ended up doing was taking a character that was the embodiment of goodness and corrupting him. And I know
Yeah.
it's supposed to, I know a lot of times now we change stories, Superman, for example, to try to reflect
Yeah.
the way society is and stuff. But we need beacons of hope. We need that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, that first of all, that was central to their character, but you don't need to darken him so much or darken them so much that they lose what in fact made them so popular to begin with.
That's that's so powerful. Yeah. That's the truth. And yeah, being like a fan of these films and these stories and these characters, you know, I feel like a lot of these people who get the opportunity to write, direct, create, films and imaginations, I feel like they're not as big as fans, or they don't put as much heart into what truly made these characters great, what truly made these characters work. And so I think we're in maybe a dark age in film, but I don't know, I've seen a few shows here and there. There's a lot of independent stuff coming out that's really changing the idea, because I think we're tired of the the I the lack of care for a character, and we're tired of reusing the same IPs over and over again. I think people want new things. People want flavor in I mean, because we'll go on the weekend to see a movie. That's what we want to do. We don't want to go and hear, a political idea or a shoehorned idea or something that's rushed just to make money based on a formula that works.
Yeah.
We want to go in and feel inspired, or feel, we go to see a horror movie. We want to feel scared. We want to feel like you want to be given those feelings, those human feelings that the characters and the world that is built within these stories.
Well, I think that's what independent film.
Yeah.
Uh, and by the way, the tough part here is, in no way do we want to throw shade at the amount of work that
Yeah.
so many people
Oh, yeah.
behind and in front of the scenes do. Even in the movies that we may not be as excited about anymore, and that didn't do well financially.
Mm-hmm.
But it does seem like in independent film, it's kind of like the person who still hasn't published or still hasn't
Yeah.
gotten that hit record, or they're
Yeah.
just so passionate behind the
Mm-hmm.
scenes, and they're really honoring the craft. And it's great to honor the people in front of the camera, but I have to tell you, I have so much respect
Yeah.
for the people who are behind the camera.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much work that's done,
Yeah.
and it's just amazing what independent film is creating. And I would even say, if you're on YouTube, one of the wonderful things about YouTube is you get to discover some of these artists, not just in film but also in music, who are
Mm-hmm.
who may not have gone mainstream yet, but they're amazing, and they're
Mm-hmm.
able to get their stuff out, thankfully.
Yeah.
And that's the wonderful thing about, here I'm trying to go full circle even with school, but I think that schools need to have entrepreneurial programs where young
Me.
people can begin to pursue
Yeah.
a passion before they even go to school, so they know what they're going to school for, or they know what
Yeah.
their path is going to be. Again, when you were asking, how did you get from A to B, a lot of the adults that I work with, they may have wanted to be in a band, and no one says that you have to, that's where you're going to get all your money from, but it's like they
Mm-hmm.
don't even have a chance to play the guitar anymore, or they enjoyed doing these different things, but they started earning money sort of in a traditional way, either went to school and pursued the stuff that was traditional, but all of a sudden now, come their late 20s, their 30s, their 40s, they're unsettled, and it really doesn't
Yeah.
have much to do with, they have a good job, they have a good relationship with their partners. It's actually just something within them, like calling back and saying, hey,
Yeah.
you can still do this. And we wrestle with that because we haven't had a chance to really pursue that. So I see that in the independent filmmakers. A lot of them have jobs on the side, but they're so passionate about this that they're willing. Doesn't matter what the weather's like. Doesn't matter if it's 3 a.m. They want to make these things work, and
Yeah.
it's really neat to be around. I'm happy to have a seat at the table, but I'm older now. That's not as that's it, sure, it's a passion, and I'm grateful to help anybody out who asks, "Hey, would you like this?" And I'm honored that they would think of me for some of those. But I just feel so I feel so honored just to watch people really pursue something that they're passionate about. And anyway, that's what I see though in the independent space, and some of their work far exceeds those who have budgets that are in the millions.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it takes a creativity. In the military, we learn this a lot. Do more with less. When
Yeah.
you're able to be so resourceful, and it's just that passion and that ability, because it comes down to storytelling. It's not about the CGI or the costumes or
Right.
the camera itself. Like, you could have a 1980 Nokia, but if you use that in a way to tell the story, use that lens, use that whatever it is that you have, and you tell a compelling story that immerses those people, immerses who watches it and listens to it, you'll go further than any Hollywood blockbuster with an infinite budget, because you care so much about the story and the character, almost like you're creating, now, I guess, how should I word this? But you're creating a real person within these stories. And then you have actors who realize it. You have editors who, invoke that emotion through a subconscious level of the music, of the lighting, of the color grading itself. Like, every little bit and piece, if you can do that on a resourceful level, like you were saying, and the passion of, what's better? You have a character that's tired, right? Maybe when your actors are up till 3 a.m., that line's going to sound a little more realistic
Yeah.
because they're like, come on,
Yeah.
let's go home.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's a friend of mine passed away a few years back. He was an art professor, and I'd known him for about 20 years, and he was a docent at the Wadsworth Athenaeum in Hartford,
Cool.
Connecticut. Uh, an amazing person because he was involved in
Mhm.
education in ways that I didn't realize, which was really neat just to realize that connection that we had there. But and then as an artist, he always was looking at things in a different way. So you might go, why would you do that? Again, just outside the box, right?
Yeah.
So both of us, he was a cinephile, so we enjoyed watching, and it was actually thanks to him that I got a little bit more involved in different films that I would have never seen before. I mean, I took a film class in college, and it was a foreign film class. Saw things that I would never see otherwise. The tough part about that, though, is every single one of them ended in, maybe one or two didn't, but most of them all ended in tragedy. I mean, it was just,
Yeah.
it really tugged on the heart.
Yeah.
So, towards the halfway through the course, you're not getting excited about seeing the film because you just don't feel like walking away feeling just so beat up by it. But anyway, my friend's name was Robert, and Robert and I would. After seeing some of these films, when they would come up for an Oscar, we would then sit back and say, okay, I wonder what they're going to win. And it was really neat because when you dissect it, you're kind of able to pick things. Well, this one was really good with this. And so that was a lot of fun to do with him. There was a lot of film that I think is ignored. And it's because I think we've gotten to that whole point. We're feeding a machine, and
Yeah.
that does happen to be formulaic, and so
Mhm.
if you're not going to focus on those characters specifically and really focus on the story, if it's just all about, as you had said, the effects, you're going to lose an audience, and I think we're seeing this right now.
Mhm.
There are sites that are doing very incredible amount of views because people are so interested in the independent space
Yeah.
because they don't have much to work with.
Mhm.
And I think we're also going to see that right now. There's what's the word I'm looking for? Like a contracting. The studios don't have the money to spend anymore, so I
Yeah.
think you will see that pendulum swing
Mhm.
back, and I think we'll start getting better quality. But if you compare some of the movies today to what the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man,
Yeah.
again, he just happened to be a superhero, but it was really
Yeah.
about that character. The um, it was about Peter Parker, both
Mhm.
dealing with it as a teenager and as a person. That's why we were like, oh my goodness, now you got to put on that mask and no one can know who you are. Now it's just you take for granted that, oh, this is going to be all right. So it may seem like we're ranting or just going on and on, but I got to throw in one more example. The old Star Wars film,
Mhm.
as much as it was about I'm OG. I like Kirk and Spock.
Yeah.
Now, as much as it was about those characters, it was also about the ship. Like one of my
Yeah.
favorite things is that when you're introduced to the Enterprise, it's almost like they're introducing a character. The way they take their time showing that,
Yeah.
so this is going to sound really silly. In Star Trek 3, when they blow up the ship, you feel a loss. And so when Kirk says, my God bones, what have I done? You know that resonates not just with the characters themselves in the situation that they're in, but there goes this, iconic symbol at the same time. And it's like, here I am. I'm in my 50s, and I watch those things, and I still get as emotional. Yes, over a sci-fi film, I still get as caught up and emotional in it, and I think I find different threads through it as I look at it in a different way. So again, I think that's a reflection of work that has been done very, very well.
Yeah.
And if you can produce that in the form of a book, in any kind of storytelling format, I mean, that's a plus. And if you're keeping that in mind as you're writing, I think that's where you're going to find, that's the secret, I think.
Wow, 100%. That's phenomenal. So I have another question for you. It kind of pivots, maybe not so much as we might think, but as the founder and owner of Authentic Embassy, you ask you ask your people's question, who are you really?
Yeah.
And I just kind of want to dive into that philosophy and how you help people almost rediscover who they are really.
Yeah. Look, I think a lot of times when you have anybody who has any kind of program, or you have anybody who is inspired to start something, and even when we talk about the storytelling, a lot of this comes from the individual. Uh, it comes from the writer, or the person, the creator. It comes from them, uh, and from what they experienced. So I think then, as this question, who are you really? I think we're asking ourselves that from what, day one.
Yeah, yeah,
Even though, um, so I work with young people and adults, but even the young people, it may not even be, let's say, a coaching session of any kind, but in the things that we are covering, we could be covering a story. Um, in an English course, we could be doing a creative writing exercise. It really is anything. We're still asking kind of that question in what we're doing, because what we're trying to do is help them discover who they are through their writing, or through their reading, or through their creative exercises, through anything really. So I just think it's one of those questions that we've always um, been searching to answer. And I don't know. I wish I knew there was a moment where it was an aha moment, but I just found that the easiest way, when I started working with adults, the easiest way to sort of understand where we had to go was to ask that. Because if they're not sure, then I know that that's our starting point. If
yeah,
they say, "Well, I'm an engineer and I enjoy doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm really passionate about," so okay, so now we have sort of the foundation, and we can build from there. But if someone doesn't really, I don't know. I've been trying to figure this out all my life. Great, this is our starting point. So, and with adults especially, you don't have to stay. I'm not. I'm more about having them answer that question for themselves, to determine how and where they want to go next. And it doesn't have to even be with me. I'm happy just to help them begin to discover who they are, and then once they have an idea, okay, I want to maybe focus more on health. I want to focus more on this. Good, find that individual that will help you be successful. Um, I don't want this to come out the wrong way. I don't need to. Of course, we're always looking for people to work with, right? And we're happy to work with them. But I want you to work with the person that is going to help you the most, based on what it is that you need. And so I always kind of like to look at it that way. And that's, and actually, hold on. I think I used to ask a similar question. Okay. So I'm having a flashback here. It's hard
yeah,
because sometimes you're trying to wonder,
yeah.
and when you work with both adults and young people. So there was this activity I started doing, I think it was in the 2000s. At the end of the school year, I would have the kids. Originally, what I was going to do, there was a teacher who um, would ask students to write something, that they would get back when they were in high school or seniors. And I was trying to do something like along those lines, where I'd have them film a sentence or two, just, hey, this is just a quick clip, and then they'd have a little written piece. And one of the things was, I think, a question about who are they. Uh, I was never able to follow through successfully in getting these things to them when they got to be seniors, because of the logistics and different things. But I had started that as early as the 2000s. But again, it's just one of those questions that's always been floating around in the head to help people realize maybe the direction they want to go in. But it's just interesting. It's different for young people than it is for older folks. I think if you're younger and you're able to kind of begin thinking about that, of course you're going to change. Of course you're going to grow and evolve. But I think in beginning to sort that out, that helps when you're dealing with negative influences and whether or not to be part of the group, whether or not, I think it really helps with identity and being able to navigate like bullying and negative experiences.
100%. Wow, that's phenomenal. There's a recent realization I had. Again, I'm always talking these philosophical or like nerdy things with my girlfriend, but I turned to her and I was like, when at what age did they stop asking what did you want to do when you grew up?
Yeah.
Like, we're babies, right? And we're kids, right? If I said as a 5-year-old, I want to be an astronaut, everyone's like, yeah, you can do that. Super supportive usually. But then it's like, I don't know, for me, it was some point late middle school, early high school. There was just this realization that it's like, oh, you're going to have to go to college, there's a limit. They put a limit on you, right? And I feel like that was when, there was that internal battle kind of began of like, do I just become the 9-to-5 mindset where my life is just a job and I can't have passion and heart into it and it can't be my calling? Or do I go and pursue like the person, like you said, who wanted to be in a band, a teacher who wanted to be in the band, go and be in a band. You know what I mean? Like, and that was the realization I had recently pursuing this. I was like, well, why do we tell these kids, like, we grow them up, you can be anything you want. And then there's some point, and she was like, you're right, there is. And she was like, I don't know the exact point where it changed, but there's a point where it's like, you got to start being realistic. And I feel like that's when who we are kind of dies almost, or it gets suppressed deep inside. And we all have these passions and these hearts and such. And so I feel like you lose that. And oftentimes you have to rediscover that. And I think for some people it's a lot later, or it's super early.
You got it. I'm going to forget his name, and I wish I could recall it more quickly, but so there's, I don't know if you call it a theory, a study, or what have you, but I'm also of the belief, though, that we lose our gifts that we're given when we're due to Western culture. I think we have a much greater connection, a much greater awareness that goes beyond speaking. Just there are certain things that I think that we are able to do in those very early years of life that I think Western culture kind of stymies. And then you're also more or less the way that, so I want to try to articulate it, and I feel like I'm going to do a terrible job. So let me give this example. I work with a lot of over the last 4 or 5 years, I've worked with a lot of families who are non-traditional, and what I mean by that is in terms of education, they homeschool, they use different platforms, but the thing is, they are incredibly involved in what, and they try to create these different experiences. Okay, this weekend we're going to go visit this. This weekend but we're not just going to go visit that. Let's do some sort of a report on it. Let's have a discussion, not just a report where it's this long or this big, or it was erected in this year. Let's talk about its significance. What does it represent? It's iconic. Why? How does it show, let's say, represent the area? Different things like that. I see some parents who for some, it might look like they're pushing their children too much, where they're in music, they're swimming, they're doing archery, they're horseback riding, they're skeet shooting. What they're doing, though, is that I don't know that we realize what we can do, even taste. What do we like, unless we've tried it? And with a couple of students, there's a group I meet with every Sunday morning. And one of the things we're talking about is how um, the older generations, when you went to high school, there was usually in freshman year, you would go through these different classes. It would be shop for a couple weeks, it'd be metal for a couple weeks, automotive for a couple weeks. You had sewing, cooking. It was all these things that have that everybody needs to kind of know anyway, to a certain degree. But it was also, how well are you when it comes to doing any kind of building? How well? So you get to sort of experience that and say, okay, maybe next year I'd like to pursue that for a semester as an elective. We don't have that anymore. Very few schools offer those kinds of electives. Now, one of the conversations we had was that, well, wait a minute. Some of these are basic needs that some people aren't even aware of.
Yeah.
And so one of the students had said, well, isn't that the responsibility of the parent? Okay, maybe, but, and I don't want to criticize anybody. The thing is look at how insane our lives are today. So I'm not passing the buck or anything. I don't want to be for or against. Being in the middle. If you just look at how busy everybody's life, excuse me, boy, you better edit that out. There's everybody's lives are very, very busy. And not only that, if you look at the economy today, that limits things too. So it becomes harder and harder to do what you would like to do. So then it becomes a responsibility of the schools. And the schools aren't doing necessarily all the things that they could be doing. So there are a lot of things involved. But just from the observation perspective, I see these parents and their lives are incredibly busy themselves. It's not like these people have all this free time, right? So, but they have their children doing a lot of different things. And I really think that that's kind of the secret. You don't know what you're good at. You don't know where your passion lies. And then they just seem to really take things to the next level that I don't see happening. At least that wasn't my experience when I was in the public school. It seems like in the public school where it's all about the pacing guide. We need to get through to this. We need to get through to that. We need to get through this. And again, taking that middle perspective, I can see why, but not everybody learns the same way.
Yeah.
And not everybody's at the same level in the room. Oh, but we're moving on now.
Yeah.
What? So that's the other advantage that some of these parents have is that it's the individual pursuing that education, pursuing what is interesting to him or her. So there's that. So I think I'm hoping, AI, for example, makes it easier to sort of assess and see where someone, where their ability level is. So I think AI might be able to help that when it comes to being able to, let's say, maintain a certain pace in a classroom, even if you have 30 or 40 students, because one of the ways it can work is, all right, if I've done a couple of math problems and let's say I don't really get the concept. All right, well, here's a whole bunch of practice. Okay, so once I get to that, now it'll then jump me up to where I need to be. If you can do that with AI programming, then I think we may be able to see more progress. But it's just, again, going back to the type of families that I work with, there's a lot more that goes into having us become interested in education. And I think what we've done in the public schools is the larger classes, fast pacing, it's all about testing. I think we've lost what it means to educate. And educate should be fun, and it should be interesting, and it should be, what am I passionate about?
Yeah, 100%. I think, and I guess going back to it, like when you have that non-traditional way of learning, like for me personally, I've realized And I'm kind of a slow learner, but once I get something, I don't know, it's like I just have this clicking moment. It's almost like muscle memory. And I realized that it took me a long time to learn it, self-teaching myself with all the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you have that non-traditional way of learning, you allow your kids to not only learn how they learn, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
and be able to be self-educators and self-sustaining, but it also builds confidence. There's a book that I read, The Book of Five Rings by Miyamada Musashi. He was a feudal era Japan samurai.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and his philosophy was to never settle
Yeah.
and to always be doing different things. Like, he went and he became a writer and a poet for many like royalty families and stuff like that. But he pursued that for like 10 years after he was like a renowned martial artist in Japan. And his whole philosophy was that the more that you do can link to what your true passion is. And at the end of his life, he wrote this book in a cave. He spent like 5 years at the end of his life just in a cave. His adopted son would like bring him up food and water, and he just dedicated because he wanted to leave that behind. But it was this philosophy that like the more that you do is the more that you can relate to other things, and it builds a confidence. It builds who you are. And I think kind of going back to your statement is like, by doing so many different things, you find your passions, but you also find how you learn. How do you feel? How are you able to, like, how do you do things? Who are you, by learning and experiencing life, not just, hey, let's study this unit. Let's learn about the Revolutionary War so you can take a test and get a 90 or a 60 on it.
Yeah.
It's more, and again, AI, and I think that's it. It'll go into the next question, but AI is going to give us an opportunity to be able to focus more on learning a trade, learning a skill, rather than just passing a test and getting a good grade.
Yeah. So, people are on both sides of the fence, right? Because there's a lot of fear behind it.
Yeah.
I think right now the tough part is, and I think we saw this with even the internet. And again, I just want to preface, I am not putting anybody down. I'm not throwing shade in any direction. But with certain things that were happening on the internet or social media early on, even getting, as teachers, our rooms were being furnished with smart boards. Remember the smart boards?
Yeah.
I think they called it, right? Well, the funny thing about the smart boards, though, is that so I remember having conversations with some teachers, and they'd say, when are we going to have a workshop on how to work these smart boards? Because the students knew how to work them even more than the teachers did. Well, what was interesting there is, and again, I'm not throwing shade at you, but I can't help but chuckle. All you had to do was go online.
Yeah.
Here's a situation of educators themselves kind of missing. Wait a minute. I can find this out. I put in a water garden myself because I looked online. A water garden. I haven't done math and to that extent and different things. So it's amazing. It's amazing. You have all that information in front of you, and sometimes I think we just kind of either forget or just kind of we're not used to it. So I think AI in that respect will allow people to, I think, grow faster and learn faster, because once you've reached a certain level, okay, here's practice now to take you to that additional level. But in terms of learning how you learn, I'm not sure the model that is there today. It needs to change. It really needs to change, and it's above my pay grade, but it needs to change.
100%. And I think that's probably what youth, like I'm in college now, and being a little bit older, I've been blessed with maybe a little more wisdom, and not that anything crazy, but I guess as you get older, us guys, we take a little bit more to mature, but I see a lot of people struggling. They're like, they'll get there, they don't know authenticity, they don't know who they are. And I guess that's what college and being 18 to 21 is for, and the rest of your life. But they get in there and they're stressing out about a class. And it's like, if you take the time and it comes to doing many things, exploring what you're passionate about and learn how you learn, and finding out what you're good at, what you're passionate about, it'll reveal your strengths and weaknesses. It'll reveal like, oh, if I study in this way, I can retain things more. I'm better at learning, or if I do this like a specific way for me personally, I can then be more proficient at something more efficiently. And I think college college, at least for me, has been better at that than when I was younger, because they give you the more freedom on how you go about things, as long as you get that assignment in, as long as you do your readings, write the essay. But I think we do need an educational shift to allow young individuals to pursue who they are. What do they want to do? I mean, they get out into the world at 18 and they're expected to just like, I'm going to go and be the best, writer in the world, but there's nothing to facilitate. They don't know where to go to even facilitate that skill or pursue that, It's kind of like they're just dropped onto an island, and they got to figure it out.
Yeah, you're spot on about that. The amount of pressure now for someone who's graduating. One of the things that always upset me, though, was that push for college.
Mm-hmm.
College.
Yeah.
I mean, look at it right now. We have I'm trying to find the word, but those who have a trade, we're in trouble. We're in trouble as a country, because there's such a need right now for people who have a trade. Well, we just spent how many years just pushing college. Yeah. Whereas a trade would be just as, I mean, think about it. You're already out in the workforce pretty quickly. You're already earning. And right now, if you have a trade, my goodness, you're not saddled with thousands of dollars of debt.
Yeah.
I forgot what school. Someone just told me it's like $68,000 now a year. 68,000. Yeah. So I think people are feeling that they're not getting their money's worth, because all of a sudden now it's going to take a lifetime for me to pay down and then I don't know if you're aware, but in Oregon, they just, no, California, they just passed people are what's the hot dog? So many things going through my mind. But people are getting $20 an hour to work in fast food restaurants.
Yeah.
$20 an hour. And I think first of all, that's great. But what you would think our leaders would realize is that drives the cost up of everything. And it looks like Seattle is about ready to do the same thing. Now, to be fair, it doesn't apply to everything, but a lot of these don't even require much of an education at all.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that people shouldn't get a decent wage, but these things have to tick up. Just all of a sudden now demand this is going to be what people get paid per hour. Again, the danger is driving everything up so that people can't afford to live where they live and all that. That's another story. But going back to, but I think that's why, though, it would be nice to see more of a, like, for example, if you have a business department or a business course, we need someone in there who's not a dinosaur. And that's not to say that person doesn't bring a whole bunch of experience, but things are changing rapidly. So that's fine if you have somebody who has been older. I'm sorry, someone who is older, that's fine. But at least let's look at supplementing that with having new business owners come in to talk about how they were able to get from point A to point B. How do you establish an LLC? What are the things that you need to be aware of? I think we need to start doing some of that. But look, I think that even needs to be in leadership. You have people who are running the government, whether on a local level or federal level, who've never even had a business. So why are you determining what constitutes? Why are you making these rules and regulations and doing when you yourself have never been in that situation? Now, mind you, I would have never said that 20 years ago. I would have never, probably even 10 years ago. being in business for yourself, you suddenly realize all these things, whether or not you want to hire someone or not, or if it's just
Yeah.
yourself, or you just don't. And I think it would have been, my goodness, talk about being able to go farther faster. I think graduating from high school, having that knowledge, oh my goodness, even if it's a side thing that you pursue,
Yeah.
you're going to get money for things that you are passionate about or that you
Yeah.
like. And then you're going to say, well, wait a minute, maybe I need to know a little bit more about financing. So I'm
Yeah.
not going to go for 4 years. I'm going to go and take a course or get a certificate. Okay, I have financing now. All right, now I want to pursue this. And I'm going to get. That's the mindset. That's not what's being
Yeah.
taught, though.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that idea of modular education should be more effective because, again, like in the business aspect, there's anyone who starts a business, everyone comes with different strengths and weaknesses in life in general. So like maybe they take a class on financing or marketing or maybe like business leadership. And you don't have to be tied down to a full scale 4-year degree.
Right.
You're going to be potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt just because that, like, for me personally, like marketing and advertising is my weakness. So like I would love to be able to just take, hey, maybe if I took 6 months to a year of just classes doing that, or like for me, video production, like I've naturally learned color grading on my own, but like graphics and things like that, that's kind of my weakness right now. So I would love to be able to just say, hey, I'm going to take a course doing that. But instead, we're kind of still in that kind of almost ritualistic at this point idea of like, you have to get the 4-year degree and get this full scale, full circle thing.
Yeah.
When someone who's entrepreneurial or creative, if you know yourself, and going back to being authentic, if you know yourself and know where your strengths lie in a certain pursue and passion, you can supplement what you need. And I think that should be something that, and I know you're definitely doing that, especially with the advent of AI, and you're teaching students how to use AI for whatever it is they're pursuing, right?
Yeah.
And how they can implement those tools and have relevant information to what's evolving.
Well, the biggest thing for AI is that it really took off, all of a sudden hit the mainstream, last spring.
Yeah.
So one of the
Yeah.
things I did was create an intro course, though, for the sole purpose of getting the students to look at how it has already been around for, I don't know, 40 years at least. It's already been around, but they had major shifts occur like in the 20 teens and most recently. So this is another thing we've talked about this in the classroom before, where technology, you might enter as a freshman and the technology may change that area that you're pursuing so drastically that the job you might have thought about having by the time you're done with college is no longer available, or there are new jobs, right? But I think it's even faster now. It's progressing even quicker with the advent of the advances in AI. But one of the things I did with the AI course was just to help young people see the areas that AI is progressing or how it's being used for the sole purpose of how can you use it. That's another thing too. I was starting to talk about it before, but then didn't circle back with the smartboard. The other thing was with the internet, the smartboard. But what I wanted to talk about was how AI, they're not teaching students how to use AI in the classroom. So one of the things I want to do was, okay, when it comes to education, you want to be aware of this. When it comes to video production, do you know deepfake? The software is all available.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and start using it and learning now.
Yeah.
Google is offering certification in some of their AI areas. You don't need to pay for it. So you could begin using that and helping people who don't know how to do, let's say, user prompts and different things like that. So, I mean, there's so much stuff that's out there that you could begin doing now, not waiting till you graduate high school, not waiting till you graduate college. If it's interesting to you, so now there's that next step, right? Now you just need to start. But in the back of the mind, we're still stuck in that, well, I'm going to have to go to school, or I'm not going to be able
Yeah.
to make much. No, you can. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You had shared a couple days ago the artwork of that artist.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of a student a couple years ago I came across where she was doing, I swear, it looked like published work. It looked like she
Really.
was already an experienced artist. That's how wonderful the artwork was. And I didn't want to push. I didn't want to be intrusive in my questioning, but I was just trying to gauge what she was going to do with what did she have in mind. And there wasn't really much of a. She was kind of undecided. I'm not even sure, for something like that, the way her talent was, I don't I don't think she'd have to go to a 4 year. She could possibly go to like a 1 or 2 year program, get her certification, and then jump right in.
Yeah.
But these options, uh, the hardest part, what I discovered with my juniors and seniors when I was in the traditional school system is that they just didn't know what was out there. They just didn't know what
Mhm.
was available. I don't think we were doing enough to really uh, share that or give them options or let them know what they're. And so today you do have universities on a lot of their sites. They have a thing you probably even did it. You fill out like a
Yeah.
questionnaire type deal or assessment they call it.
Yeah.
And so I share that with a lot of my students to get them thinking. And then again, coming back to the AI,
Yeah.
part of it was, okay, here are the different AI positions that will be around for a while, whether it's an engineer, I forgot some of the titles, but just so that they have an understanding of, hey, I kind of like the coding. That kind of came easily. All
Yeah.
right, so here, start with Scratch, then you can go on to
Mhm.
the other. Okay, it's in video. All right, I can start making a podcast. I can start doing
Yeah.
videos now.
Yeah.
So my thing was to try to inspire and motivate them to use the AI in a positive way.
Yeah.
Understand the threat. Again, we're not going, it's all roses, but just
Yeah.
understanding that this is what your generation will have to think about. But here
Yeah.
are some things that you can begin accessing right
Uh,
now if it's something of interest. And again,
Yeah.
I just trying to do the things that I don't see always happening, or trying to come at a different angle that will allow that student to pursue things faster.
Mhm. Yeah. Definitely. The thing is too is I think the impact that AI has had, and I use AI to help me edit podcasts with multicam. I use I'm trying to think AI for like some of my titles. Sometimes I'm like struggling. I'll go through and I'll be like, oh, here are some titles with the topic for similar podcasts or similar, guests or whatever. And sometimes I struggle with creating a title. So I'm like, hey, help me with so a lot of
Sure.
the menial tasks
Yeah.
or sometimes I'll even take like a newsletter from somebody and be like, can you break down why this is such an effective newsletter in the email? And so I feel like using tools, and you're giving a lot of these young folks who want to pursue their passions access to learn about these tools early on, because we're still I think, in the primal stages of AI.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think it's going to do a lot of crazy stuff. Premiere Pro recently, I don't know if it's out yet, but generative fill, like in Photoshop,
Yeah.
like AI generative fill, it's going to be in Premiere Pro. So if I'm wearing, like, say, if I want this microphone to be a little rubber chicken, I might be able to circle it and turn it into a rubber chicken.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
the and Sora,
Sora is
I don't know if you've heard
frightening.
of that. That's scary. And
Frightening. Yeah.
I saw the stock photos or stock videos of that, and I was like, that's somebody made that. There's no way that a
Yeah.
computer was able to generate that from a few sentence prompts,
Yeah.
you know? And so all these tools are coming out, and I've noticed that there's this big fear. It's like, it's going to be Terminator. Maybe it will be, but, right now, if you get involved now, well, it's super early and understand what you can use now. When it gets super advanced, there's not going to be that learning curve. You're going to be ahead of the ball game,
Yeah.
or you're going to be able to teach people how to use it in your skill, in your craft, in your trade.
Yep.
And so you're going to be light years ahead. It's like people who adopted the internet or adopted YouTube in 2009, people who started it. Now it's just kicking off where it's essentially the new cable.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, it is. Although they
yeah.
have to do something about those commercials, let me tell you. But
Yeah.
yes, it is. The oh goodness. Continue. I was going to make a statement, but I got so caught up in the YouTube I lost it. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh.
Sorry about that. So no, I mean, I just think that AI is a phenomenal asset to anyone. And I mean, I use it to help me design t-shirts and stuff. Like a lot of graphic designers who make graphic tees, right? They'll order packages online of, like, let's say they want to make like a rock band type t-shirt. So they want a skull, right? They'll buy a little graphic or they'll find it online and they'll implement it.
Yep.
Whereas in AI, now I can be like, I've been watching a lot of, Star Wars lately, or a lot of, whatever it is, right? I'm inspired. I want to do this, and I could type a prompt and get a little, image of something and put it into the design. And now I can almost have a more creative design in a graphic t-shirt and get specifically what I'm looking for, in depth. If I want a specific comic book art style, right? Or a graphic in the art style of like a corporate graphic or a logo, I can type that in the style that I want and get something so tailored that now you can use that specifically for what you need. And recently with one of my clients, I do videography for CT Aquatics. Right now they do YouTube how-to on saltwater aquariums, but
Nice.
they're growing coral to sell it one day. And we're working to design t-shirts and some graphic backgrounds. And he was like, oh, can you use AI? Because I explained a little bit what I do. Can you use AI to make this background? Because they're going to stencil on a logo on their wall. And I was like, yeah, we can do that. It's a cartoon coral reef.
Yeah.
So we're experimenting with that and stuff. And so it's how you, with anything in life, how you use the tools you're given. Going back to independent film, the resources, and there's an infinite amount of use case,
And you kind of already alluded to it. There was, and I think this is, I was thinking maybe this was the point I was going to make before I lost my train of thought. But during the Y2K situation in the late 90s, I was doing corporate training. And that was the greatest fear that people had as we entered the 2000s, was you had these, the Adobe products, for example, that was going to take away from people who, does that constitute original photography and paintings and artwork and graphic design and all that. And so there was this great fear, but look how it up-leveled, right? And it allowed everybody to be creative. And I think we're going to see the same thing. As you had said, we've seen how the internet is being used differently, or YouTube is being used differently. And I think we're going to see that with AI. AI has been with us, though, already for such a long time. For example, Netflix has been using AI for years. Our cell phones have been using AI for years. We don't even realize that when you use the CAPTCHA online, that's the data from that is being used for AI. So I don't think a lot of us realize we were already kind of using it. It's just now it's more accessible. And I think there's going to be that creative aspect that is just going to blow minds. So now the tough part, though, is, and Elon Musk was really adamant about this, though, is just being ahead of the curve, though. So in case the genie escapes the bottle, rather than being reactive, I know that publicly he's been advocating being proactive in being able to, I'm not sure control is the right word, but be much more mindful and having guidelines in case we have to rein certain things in other industries, but just being mindful of being proactive in that rather than reactive. But it's going to take your generation. They're going to have to come up with the guidelines and the rules, because I think the sky is the limit when it comes to making content and being creative, which is amazing.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that because, Adobe products, Premiere Pro, Photoshop, like I do photography gigs or even for fun sometimes. And to me, that's like part of the natural workflow. You take the photo, you put it in Photoshop, you clean it up a little bit,
Yeah.
and then you can post it or it's a fully fledged product. And I never realized and thought of like when Adobe was first coming out that was like people were afraid it was going to take the job of photographers or change it to the point where people are out of a job. And now it's almost integrated to
Yeah.
it's the norm. It's the
Yeah.
norm. Like I put my photos in Photoshop no matter what. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
So it's crazy to think that we were already there before with the internet and all these softwares that are normal now. And now AI, I think, is in that same thing where it's the fear stage. Everyone's afraid and unsure. And I think, as you said, guidelines, making legislature that kind of limits, I think, especially when it comes to like deep fake or maybe things that could be used as propaganda type stuff.
Yeah. 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 Well, see that was when I teach journalism, that's one of the things that really bothers me is that, before, I mean, it's great that everybody has cameras on their phones, but before any kind of video content used to be made available, news organizations would vet that content. But now everybody can post content. So, like you just said, how are we going to be able to determine its authenticity? Are we going to be able to tell that it, because right now everybody just reacts emotionally to everything. And organizations or people who post things, if there's a retraction, they're not very that's not front and center because it doesn't get all the clicks. That doesn't get all the news. And that's a little bit of a danger there as well because, hey, you should own up to the fact that you just got everybody all worked up for something. Hey, there was a riot or a protest because these things can happen in a flash based on something that's posted online. So is that going to change the responsibility of people who post? So there's a lot there that will have to be explored. But yeah, so um, but the positive side of some of that, though, like the Sora that you mentioned, oh my goodness, imagine doing that as a project for school, where your teacher says, I'd like you to from ideation to having an end product. I want you to create a story, 3 to 4 minutes or whatever. And here you have, the script, the dot, and then the film. I mean, those are some exciting things right there to be able to do. Yeah. 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 It really is. Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 And again, it's going to allow people to start doing this not after they've graduated from a 4-year institution. Yeah, and some of that stuff is even again has existed. Uh, the the capabilities of doing some of this have actually already been around. The steps you've had to do a lot more steps, and AI helps to reduce that. But slowly, the software and capabilities out there have been around. Uh, but and imagine, my goodness, imagine being able to do this as a teenager and already you had mentioned this earlier already have an experience in that format or experience with working with that, and then once you're ready to really dive in, or you take a course, or the new technology comes out, you already have that background, you already have that knowledge. And by the way, that's the other part though, talking about your generation providing a list of guidelines or a way to navigate this in all industries. It's going to require people who actually know AI. Right now, some of the people that are involved have no clue. And you really need someone who's going to oversee it. It's like we were talking about people who have a business and then regulate business. It's different than someone who's never started a business and all of a sudden are telling you what to do. It's going to be the same thing with AI. You need, whether it's a committee or something, but we have some people. I'm not going to get involved in naming names, but that's the fear that I have, is that people who are in charge of overseeing certain things, if it doesn't include a committee of people who actually know what happens or are familiar with it beyond maybe taking a course, um, they're the ones that um, need to be relied on when it comes to setting up any kind of guidelines. Otherwise, you end up being either uh, um, too strict, and then holding everybody back, uh, and being compromised maybe just for specific industries, or you end up being too, for lack of better phrasing, loosey goosey, and then all of a sudden, things get out of control. But yeah, I just saw a video of someone who, I don't know the name of the position, but he's in charge of monetary policy in the US. And he was on a video where he was trying to explain it and couldn't explain it. It's like, well, wait a minute, you're in charge of that. Even if you create a chart, you should be able to somehow, you know, share with us what that means and how it works. Otherwise, why are you in charge? Uh, and so that's the scary part, is you really want to make sure you have competent people in some of these positions because of the ramifications that are involved. But again, coming back to the exciting part, for the individual person, I mean, look what the video recorder did, right? And now it's on your phone and all that. And like I said to you earlier, I know, my brother and I used to sneak the video camera out of the closet when our mom would go shopping, and we'd make these 5 or 10 minute clips. And then of course trying to do anything in post production was nearly impossible at the time because of the technology and all that. But it was just something we really enjoyed. So today, if we were both, if the technology was available at our age at that time, oh my goodness, we'd be having a ball. I imagine YouTube videos, YouTube channel, everything.